Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me once again is Brittany Martinez, the executive director of Principles First. Brittany, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me back. Happy New Year, if we're still allowed to say that.
Happy New Year to you as well. And I think we could have had plenty of conversations regarding the news cycles and the stories and the headlines we've seen in the past 3 weeks alone, really since 2026 began. But I want to take a look back at the past year because it's been the 1 year anniversary. We officially passed that this week since President Trump was sworn into office a second time. It's really been a whirlwind 365 days. And I think the defining buzzwords and phrases of the past year could be tariffs, Doge, Signalgate, Big Beautiful Bill, immigration crackdown, bunker buster bombs, historic government shutdown, Epstein files, affordability, boat strikes, and Don Roe doctrine, to name a few. That's really only scratching the surface. I probably left 20 to 30 words out. But to start off the conversation, how would you define the past year, the first year of President Trump's second term?
Well, first of all, you saying that almost felt like you were going through the alphabet. I'm sure we could probably find an instance for every letter of the alphabet. Tired, whirlwind, exhausted, and I wish that there was less of the chaos and more of the governing and diplomacy. I think that's what's been missing. In the last few weeks alone, since the last time we talked, Brittany, what was that? Maybe a couple days before the new year, maybe even the day before the new year, right? And we have kidnapped a dictator in the middle of the night. We are fighting with our friends in Greenland. Apparently, we're going to take over. I have no idea what's going on, as usual, per what this administration is doing. And I think we need to be focusing on our adversaries and not alienating our allies and our friends.
I think that's a good point, and I want to talk about specifically, since you mentioned the foreign policy, I want to focus on that first then, because President Trump, he promised he's going to put America first, but I want to talk about if you think his actions are doing just that, because over the past year, I'll name some highlights of his foreign policy. The U.S. dropped bunker buster bombs on some of Iran's nuclear facilities. President Trump and the Trump administration helped negotiate a ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel. He continued to be involved in peace talks with Russia and Ukraine. There were boat strikes in the Pacific and Caribbean. Over 30 vessels were struck. Over 100 people were killed. These attacks, the Trump administration said, were strikes in part of a campaign against drug trafficking. As you mentioned, the United States, in a military operation, captured Venezuela's sitting leader and brought him back to the United States. And President Trump said he plans to not only run Venezuela, but be heavily involved in the oil industry in that country. And just within the past few weeks, President Trump has really renewed his push for the United States to acquire Greenland, much to the chagrin of many European leaders. Is all of this putting America first?
I would say no. I would say that I didn't vote for the president in the last election, but if I were one of his supporters, I'd say, where are all the promises that you've made for us? Why are we focusing on all of these side quests, it feels like, as opposed to, reducing the cost of the goods here at home? I know that there can be arguments made. We've seen a decline in gas over the last few weeks. I've also seen statistics about people talking about whether their lives are better now than before he took office. And you can find a stat and a poll that says yes, you can find a stat and a poll that says no. Ultimately, I think what's going to happen is after people get their refund or lack thereof for taxes, I think we may be singing a different tune as far as Americans go and whether he's America first or not. Actually, he was voted in to fix the economy and to go after illegal immigration. Is the economy better? Are illegal border crossings reduced? I would say for the latter, yes, we know that's true, but we also know that it's been done in a very inhumane manner. I think people want humanity in the way that we approach these things. I'm not saying for the terrible perpetrators who partake in trafficking and exploitation of kids and all of that, of course, but otherwise, if you're someone who's lived here in this country for a long time and your biggest crime is that you came here when you shouldn't have, and you're getting dragged out of your home when you've lived here for a long time, I think that's what didn't settle well for Americans. So when he's focusing on all of these issues abroad and then those issues at home, he's not really delivering the best results as he suggested that he would. I don't think that is putting America first.
How many times in our conversations have we said it's the economy, stupid, right? The economy is always the top issue. And when people feel that the economy is not going the way that they want it to go, I mean, they start to blame the president. And I saw this stat. According to Moody's Analytics, the average U.S. household right now is spending $184 more a month on the same goods and services they were a year ago, and close to $600 more on the same goods and services they were 3 years ago. I mean, that is a lot for the average U.S. household. And President Trump said that just last week when he was in Detroit, the Trump economic boom has officially begun. But it seems like, and President Biden would probably agree, or people who supported President Biden and then eventually Vice President Kamala Harris, when they said, no, the economy's doing well, the economy's doing well, people said, I'm not feeling that. And that messaging seems tone deaf. I remember when Biden said, this is Bidenomics, and Democrats were like, no, don't attach your name to this. No one is liking this economy. Now President Trump is saying the Trump boom is here. His net worth right now, according to Forbes, is $6.6 billion. He says affordability, he's working on it, but then always caveats with, that's a Democrat hoax, it's a Democrat word. I mean, what do you think he needs to do today to focus on affordability and have people believing that this is a top issue that Republicans care about?
I think first and foremost, he has to recognize the situation at hand. I think that's where the Biden administration very clearly failed. It was, to your point, oh, it's better where it's on the way up, but it's not what the stats say. It's how you feel. It's whether you can afford to put food on your table. We talk about this every time, as you said. So we need to be able to talk about affordability, and we need to be able to talk about healthcare and the cost of healthcare. And I'd say that these haven't traditionally been the strongest of Republican talking points. But if you are president of the United States, you have the House, the Senate, obviously the White House, not to mention the Supreme Court, though that's its own thing. Wouldn't you try to fix the system in this moment as best as you could so that Republicans can be a leader on these issues? A billionaire telling people, buy only a couple presents for your kids, or like, oh, it's not, it's pretty affordable. The boom is here. Look at me. I've made it. Putting your name on it, as we know that he likes to put his name on everything. And if you're not feeling that, if the economy was booming, sure, great, amazing, fantastic. But if Americans aren't feeling that to the polls and statistics that you pointed out at the beginning of this question, that's a nail in the coffin for Republicans and as we get into midterms.
And he was asked yesterday during that really marathon of a press briefing. He was standing at the podium for over an hour and a half, and he was asked essentially if he was falling into that Biden trap of saying the economy's great, people don't feel that, and then they're going to blame you. And he said no, he's not falling into that. He said, we inherited a mess, and we've made it a beautiful, beautiful picture. His approval rating's not doing well. People are pessimistic about the economy. According to polling, they're more pessimistic about the economy in a year from now in that outlook. Do you think that this is going to drag Republicans down in the midterms?
Absolutely. And I want to put something into perspective very quickly. I was working in House Republican leadership in 2022. We were in the minority then. That feels like a really long time ago at this point in political years, but Republicans, we thought we were going to win back the House, and we ended up doing that by the skin of our teeth. But conversations were being had at the member level, essentially begging Trump not to say he was officially running for president again. We knew the announcement was coming, and it was said, wait till after midterms, because people were afraid of what those effects would have on Republicans and whether we'd be able to flip the House. So fast forward now, we're in 2026, and yes, I think he is falling into that trap, but no one can convince him otherwise. I think that we've seen time and time again, the experts, the economists, tariffs are bad, and he says, no, but we're going to do tariffs anyway, and then he takes them away and puts them back, and creates a really volatile market, not just in the US, but everywhere globally. And I think it's incredibly unhelpful. And Republicans are not in a strong place right now. Well, again, right now, it's January 21st. Election day is early November. So that's still plenty of time for Republicans to try and make a pivot here, especially if they're able to fulfill the promises of the tax refund, which at this point, I don't know. We'll see what that looks like come April 15th or what have you. But It is unhelpful to have a president who does not recognize where we are in this moment, because in order to be able to fix it, you need to be able to address it head on.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because I never have worked in politics. I've only covered it, but it almost seems easier when you're running for an election if you're the minority, right? Because you can put blame on the party in power. We saw that with Republicans going into 2024. Hey, we hear you. The economy stinks. We feel that the economy stinks. We can fix it. Now Democrats are doing the same thing. So if I'm a Republican right now and I see President Trump is threatening more tariffs, tariffs aren't popular. Every economist I've talked to have said tariffs are a tax on the American people. If I'm seeing there really doesn't seem to be a health care plan, President Trump introduced one, but as of now, there isn't a concrete plan that is a compromise that is passing between Democrats and Republicans together. I mean, if I'm seeing people aren't happy with the economy, if I'm seeing President Trump's approval rating, how am I messaging in the midterms going into that? And how do I separate from that? Or perhaps, I'm assuming based on this conversation, you don't really want to glom onto that.
I think that's a really, really good assessment there. It's a lot, everyone wants to be in the majority. It's a lot harder to legislate. It's a lot easier to complain. So it makes sense that Democrats would want to put the blame on Republicans. I think that Republicans just did that playbook, right? When it was in 2024 and it said, look at where we are on the economy. We can fix it. Trump is gonna fix it. And here we are. And again, the reality of being able to govern and legislate, it's a lot harder to do than, just a stump on the campaign trail. So I think Democrats would be right in pointing to those things. But what I would urge them to do is don't just point to the bad of one side. Actually have a plan and be able to reiterate that. Now we're talking about midterms, so people aren't tuning in the way that they do for a presidential. But when you're talking about these statewide elections, like senator, you really do need to have a plan. And I would say the same goes for Republicans. If it's a Republican trying to take over a Dem state, and things aren't going so hot over there, be able to call out those. I think that's kind of like politics 101, right? Like be able to call out the things that the other side has done bad, but the next step is be able to say how I'm actually going to fix it with some concrete examples and not just flowery language.
And when you're looking at President Trump's first year, he said during that press conference yesterday, God is proud of the job I've done. I'm curious if you think that there's any highlights here in this past year, any wins that you're seeing. We see border crossings are down. We saw President Trump and his administration work with Israel and Hamas to get that, yes, tenuous, but that ceasefire agreement in place, the hostages brought back home. I mean, do you think that there are any highlights here in the first year?
Yeah, I don't want to come on here and just be a hater. The reason that I have criticisms and concerns about this administration is because I think that rightfully they have things to be criticized. As far as good things, I'll say that I do think the immigration, though, I also, as I've said earlier, I think it's been taken too far. I do think our generosity as a country has been abused, and I do think that we need to be stronger when it comes to immigration. However, what we do need ultimately is immigration reform that is robust. I would probably point to that more than others. I think a lot of things, like I said, have been problematic. And, even as we think about the economy and we're going to fix it and we're going to do all of these things, we haven't seen that so far. So I guess that is what I would point to, with the caveat of, but it's also been really, really terrible with ICE and the aggressive behavior of these agents on the streets.
To that point, the past few weeks in 2026, we're seeing that play out in Minneapolis with ICE protests, as well as we're seeing instances where ICE is, being very aggressive and people are disagreeing with their tactics there. We're also seeing start of the year, the U.S. have an operation to get Maduro out of Venezuela, and now he's sitting in a New York City jail. We're seeing President Trump continue this push for Greenland. We're seeing European leaders, some of them saying, hey, the United States is still an ally and a friend. Others saying the United States isn't acting like an ally. We're seeing President Trump really say this Don Roe doctrine is the foreign policy, and that's justification for Venezuela as well as acquiring Greenland. What specifically are you looking out for the next year?
I mean, he really has to put his name on everything, doesn't he? Uh, we used to say in the first administration, take the president seriously, don't take him literally. Now, when he says something or someone in his administration flirts the idea of something, I do think we need to take it seriously. I think Canada is fine, but the fact that, oh, Canada, that joke at the beginning, 51st state, look now what we're saying about Greenland. So if he has said anything that's caught your eye and kind of made you pause for a second, it was a little bit jarring. I think those are the sorts of things that we're going to be paying attention to. This is what I hope he does. I hope he puts pressure on Putin when it comes to Ukraine. That's what we should be doing, and continuing to do it. And, when we're talking about ceasefires in the Middle East and continuing to put pressure, because as we know, then those ceasefires break, right? He says that he's the peace president, and then do what you say. And you know uh, I'm Cuban American. I think that Nicolas Maduro is a thug. I'm glad that he's not in Venezuela, because it will ultimately help the Venezuelan people, but at the same time, the way in which it was done is alarming. And what precedent does that set for the future? And I think that we have rule of law for a reason. Sometimes we have to break those rules, and whether that moment was when appropriate to do that, I think we could have handled it better. But honestly, at this point, nothing would really surprise me.
And as we've been talking about, we have the midterms in November at the end of the year here. What specifically are the winning messages for Republicans? Because as we've seen, history shows that when there's a party in power in the White House, Congress, and Senate, elections aren't too kind to them.
Yeah, if they can, I think gas prices in this moment, we'll see how they change throughout the year, and during holidays in the summer and whatnot. But if gas prices can stay low, and they can point to that as one example, and being able to tap into American energy, I think that's something that they can talk about. I think that they do have an opportunity to talk about immigration here again. I think the red meat base doesn't mind the aggressive nature of ICE and some of these raids that we've seen. The average American voter, though, I think is going to be a little bit harder to convince that the way it's being done is fully by the book, and an appropriate amount of aggression. I think that that's probably the two things, as a Republican who's in support of the president, should probably run on. When we think about healthcare, I think that's been a losing point for Republicans for a long time. We'll see if there's more than just a concept of a plan within the next year, though I'm not very hopeful. And I think, yeah, I think those would probably be the things: is energy and gas production, and when it comes to immigration, if that the way it's been handled is your cup of tea.
Well, based on the past 3 weeks, really based on the year and the pace of these news cycles, I know that we will have plenty to talk about in 2026 and year two of Trump 2.0. Brittany Martinez, thank you so much for joining me. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks for having me.